2, 1.
Good morning. Please silence all electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. Welcome to the November 21st, 2022 Joint Operations and Safety and Finance and Audit Committee meeting. My name is Melanie Williams, and I am the Chair of the HART Operations and Safety Committee. Councilman Gil Shisler, Chair of Finance and Audit Committee, is also he is also in attendance remotely. The meeting format is hybrid. Quorum is physically present at the HART Administrative Office, 1201 East 7th Avenue, Florida Conference Room, and the rest of the board members are participating via communication media technology. Please look at the screens of your devices. An image of the flag is displayed. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Jackson, would you please do a roll call, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Committee Member Castor?
Here.
Committee Member Kemp?
Here.
Committee Member Knight?
Here.
Committee Member Overman?
Here.
Committee Chair Shisler? Committee Chair Shisler?
Here.
Committee Chair Williams?
Here.
Also present, I believe, is HART Board Member Rena Frazier.
I'm here.
Thank you. You do have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Rules for participation and roles and responsibilities of both committees are provided in the packet. We'll move on to,
Is there any public comment?
There is a comment to be read into the record.
yeah.
Oh, okay, that's it. So there's no one speaking. So at
Just-
this, for public comment.
No, there's just a comment to be read into the record.
Okay, great. Okay,
oh.
I'd like to take a point of personal privilege.
Okay, I'll go back and state that, is there any public comment at this time?
There is a public comment to be read into the record that was emailed over the weekend, but there is no one physically present to provide that comment. I will be the one to read that comment into the record. Would you like for me to go ahead and do that?
Yes, please read the public comment into the record.
Yes, Madam Chair. This was received via email, and it states, on November 15th at nearly 11 p.m., HART employees received an email from LeGrand in the wake of unflattering news articles about the HART culture and, more importantly, accurate reporting of how LeGrand behaves in the workplace. To understand the gravity of this public comment, employees are exploring the options of legal representation and filing individual state ethics complaints regarding unfair employment practices. Employees are also seeking assistance from the state's attorney to review fraud by LeGrand and her number 2 for double dipping. Plain and simple, check the prox card entries in and out of the building. Logical next question to your CEO is, where has her number 2 been every day for 8 months? This board consistently demonstrates that CEO bad behavior is tolerated and employees have little worth to this community. Complaints about LeGrand have been filed with the HART Board of Directors dating back to April 2021. Complaints were even shared with LeGrand by the previous Board Chair Smith via email on May 1st, 2021. Chair Smith, in an email correspondence to LeGrand, of which the entire board was copied, stated that change is hard and, more inappropriately, calling employees melodramatic. Not only did Chair Smith violate HART Board policy, but she openly mocked employees, and this entire board remained silent. Employees have all suffered the consequences, and not a single person on this board should be able to continue out their term. The question is, does this HART Board complicitly continue to support former Chair Smith's statement that employees are melodramatic, or does the collective board understand its responsibility to the health and safety of all employees? Last week's email to employees from LeGrand was insulting to ruffle one's feather is to do something that causes confusion, agitation, irritation, or annoyance in another person. 57 administrative employees have resigned from HART since LeGrand began as the CEO. 57 out of approximately 120 administrative employees. Follow the numbers. Ms. LeGrand's assertion in last week's memo to employees is that she's working to change the status quo. The counter position could be that a CEO should be held to the standard that creates collaboration, relationship building, and delivers results to the community. This board has a responsibility to ask questions of the employees who have separated from HART, many being silenced by a severance agreement, and can clearly articulate improper conduct, even acts of malfeasance that they wouldn't commit on behalf of LeGrand. LeGrand has depleted this organization of dedicated, committed, talented transit professionals. Help us be the agency that makes a community proud. We want to serve all those who believe in public transit. And that concludes the statement.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
And at this time, if I could take a,
You're recognized, Ms. Commissioner Kemp.
I won't comment on the statement as is, but I'd just like to say that I was a little taken aback by former Chair Smith, and I know she hasn't been chair for more than a year, so I'm not sure what is being referred to when with that. But I'll take a point of personal privilege here. I'm Pat Kemp. I'm chair of the HART board, and today we're having a regularly scheduled committee meeting. This is not a board meeting. We were not able to call it. It needs 7 days' notice to call a special meeting. So this is the regular committee meeting, not a board meeting. But I wanted to let board members and the public know that the Board of HART takes very seriously the management issues that we've been hearing and reading about. I've been in discussion with our general counsel, David Smith, about what course of action that we should take. And he's here virtually today, and I want him to explain to the committee and public what's going to happen next.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, perfect. Essentially, as the chairperson has described, we attempted to see if we could set up a special meeting in conjunction with these committee meetings today in order to take this very important matter up for discussion. Obviously, it's not a board meeting, but it's important that the board be heard on these issues. We were unable to do so because of the 7-day requirement. So what I was then tasked with doing is to determine how we would proceed from here. I've communicated in the interim with both the CEO and Brenda Bailey, and what we are proposing to do is retain outside independent counsel. We have 2 currently procured outside independent labor and employment firms. One is Cindy Townsend at Bell & Roper in Orlando. She is unable to undertake this assignment if she were asked to do so due to overload of her work at this point. But you also have David Adams of the law firm in Ybor that bears his name among others, and he has been communicated with by Brenda Bailey, General Counsel, Counsel, and he is available to undertake the investigation. So what we are proposing to do, I believe she's either got him on standby or has already got him moving to evaluate whether these allegations, which at this point are only allegations, we need to emphasize that, have any merit, and if they do, then what would be the appropriate cause of action. This will be a matter that will be on the board's agenda for the December 5th meeting. The board will make sure it articulates its preferences in this regard and exactly how they want the investigation undertaken. But I've dealt with Mr. Adams before. He is a professional. He understands his responsibilities as an attorney. The board chooses to move forward with the retention of David Adams in this investigation. I'm sure he'll do an excellent and professional job. The point will be to have Mr. Adams report directly to the board. Everyone understands that we need to make sure this is an independent investigation and there's no potential claim of interference on behalf of anyone on staff. As I said, I've talked with the CEO. She will not interfere with any investigation, and she will fully cooperate and will share her investigation to date with Mr. Adams. We'll have that information. So this is for the purpose of bringing everyone up to date. We can't take any action. This is not a board meeting, but it's such an important issue, and as you know, it's been covered fairly extensively in the press, and it's important that the public know. As I know and as you know, the board takes these allegations seriously, and we will pursue an investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, and I don't know, Director Knight has indicated he wanted to speak, so would you want to recognize him, or do you want me to? To recognize.
Oh, I can recognize Director Knight.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And was highly disappointed in some of the things I've heard, allegations. As a board member, don't agree with what I heard, and I like to see due process. In fact, as soon as I seen the letter and got called from the news reporter, I got in contact with my chair to ask for a special meeting. 7 days, but my thing is, from that date on, 7 days, holidays and all that stuff, I don't agree to wait. I think it's something that we need to address right away. I like to hear some of I know we got a different board meeting, a committee meeting, but it's more important than anything I see right here that we need to talk about. If in order that we can do something or hear some things on some direction and the safety and a non-hostile working environment and the due process and some of the things that happen, I'm sure everybody on this board don't know or realize how many people have left for whatever reason. And I think that we've been blindsided in a lot of ways, and I'd like to know more. So from the legal perspective and also the board, without going, all kinds of ways, I like to, because everything right now is really, stop it down.
Madam Chairwoman, if you want me to respond to the director's questions, I can certainly indicate that it is possible to call a special meeting. It does require 7 days' notice. It may be called by the chair, or absence the vice chair, or the vice chair's absence the secretary, but the chair is not absent. So if the chair chooses to do so, you can call a meeting. We'll have to give 7 days' notice. Today is the 21st. The earliest I believe that would be, therefore, is Monday the 28th. I don't know what everybody's holiday schedule is, but you can certainly seek to call a meeting and see who is able to attend at that time.
Mr. Smith, does the 7 days not start when you initially received the phone call?
Well, the 7 days is a notice requirement, so it's the date that we provide the notice. The board provides the notice, and it's required to be 7 days in order to give all of the board members adequate notice, but also to notify the public. So the policy, the HART policy specifically requires that it be noticed to the public, so they would have an opportunity to attend that special board meeting. And anyone else with grievances, for example.
Thank you. Director Knight, were you making a motion, or at this point?
Yes, I make a motion that we have an emergency, and I really don't understand why an emergency in the past. From my recollection, we was able to do it without a 7-day notice. I think it's important enough, but like you, please, I'd like to make a motion that we have a special call meeting as soon as possible to get in this and to put some parameters in place and make some adjustment until we hear what's going on and investigation and everything that's needed.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes.
The policy, I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify the legal position. The policy that requires, there's two different types of meetings. One is an emergency meeting. The emergency meeting policy indicates that the health, safety, and welfare of the public must be at risk, and the scope of the meeting is only limited to the action necessary to protect the public from that danger. Both Brenda Bailey and I have evaluated this issue, and as Julie Mandel, and this is important, but we don't think it's a threat to the health, safety, and welfare, and therefore an emergency meeting would not apply. I do not want to put this board in a situation of having a meeting that's improperly called, so that the action taken is therefore challenged. I think it's important to demonstrate an emergency meeting, which still has Sunshine Act implications in terms of the notice, and a special meeting is not great concern here at this juncture, and I think the legally more defensible approach is a special meeting, and it can be called by the board, the full board, by the chair, and those are your two options, and again, I say in the absence of the chair, others, but those are the two options. This committee doesn't have authority to call it, but until it speaks to the issue, encourage the chair to do so.
Thank you.
And I would be willing and I was willing to have it called for today and attempted. We found out that it needed 7 days' notice, not 3. As you know, the notice went out and then was retracted afterwards. We would be discussing this on a regular scheduled board meeting December 5th. I know some people are taking holidays and other things at this time, but I'd be willing, maybe I can just see in this room, for one. If I were to call a meeting on Tuesday, I guess it would be, November 30th? That gives people a little bit of time to get back from the weekend if they're out of town. Tuesday, let's see, what is it?
29.
Okay. I would be willing to call a meeting on Tuesday, the 29th at 9 o'clock here. I guess we could do a survey of the members we have here, if they could make that meeting, if that would be, as long as I have everybody here.
I have a question. We would need a quorum for
Right.
that, correct?
Absolutely.
For the board to take action.
And that's
So-
what my concern was. We had the holidays coming up and, and I didn't know where to land to 7 days.
But this, to everyone's point, is a very important issue, to ensure that we get an investigation moving forward
Right.
in light of our community and in fairness to Ms. LeGrand as well.
Right.
So how about we see who all would be available to be in person? I could be here on the 29th for a quorum.
Okay.
Ms. Williams, could you be here?
No.
No, okay. And Director Knight? Okay.
I have a question.
And how about I just take this under advisement as and see if we can, because we would need a quorum of the board, not just of the members here anyway. So that would require, I believe, 7 members. So how about I do a little bit of investigating outside obviously we take this very seriously. It's important, but I don't want to call a meeting that doesn't have a quorum.
Okay.
Right. And
First
I
thing
could be available remotely.
Virtually.
Virtually,
Okay.
right.
Can we send out for that 7 day? If you need that, go ahead and send that out and we'll work on who can make it. That's the earliest, instead of
Well-
waiting. We done waited 3 days or so already.
Let me just say this, I need to, as our general counsel said, it's the board's call, it's the chair's call to do this. I do not want to do it and not have a quorum. So I don't want to set it at this moment, but I will immediately work on that after these committee meetings to see if we can have 7 people present. I would have done that before, but again, the holidays have come in between, and we did have a meeting scheduled December 5th where this was going to be taken up. But what I'll do is, I take this very seriously. We do need to move on it. If I can ensure that 7 people will be present on Tuesday, the 29th, I will do so. Maybe it'll be Wednesday, the 30th. I will take into consideration that, I will survey and find out this afternoon, and we could put the same notice we put out a few days ago at that time, if I can this afternoon find that we have 7 board members that could be present.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Schisler has his hand raised.
And I
Okay.
do too, thank you.
Commissioner Oberman, you're
Thank you.
recognized.
Director Knight, I understand your concerns. I'm very concerned about it, given that this is my last meeting and I won't be here, and we will have 2 or 3 potentially new board members that are actually appointed to this board. So this board and the quorum that you're trying to gather may be significantly different than it is now. My question is there is an opportunity down at the bottom of this agenda that calls for new business. And these committees typically will make a recommendation that is, has feet. Basically, what's been happening is this board, these committees, have been approving actions and then submitting it under consent at the board meetings. That's the way we've been operating for the last 2 years. So I'm not really sure if this item were to come up under new business, could the board, since we have a quorum today, do we have a quorum today of the two committees?
Yes, we do.
All right, if we have a quorum today, that we couldn't in fact pass a recommendation to move forward on the investigation at this point with the board's consent approval on December 5th. In the event that you're unable to get a board together that is a new set of board members, I won't be here. I'm appointed as a consequence of being on the Board of County Commission. I sit on all 3 of these committees and have listened to the issues associated with employment. This is the 3rd CEO we've gone through where we've had a problem associated with how things have been operating here. This board has wrestled with those issues in the past, and now we're here again. So I would like to find out if it's possible, if this item were to come up under new business, could this board approve a recommendation to move forward? David, can you give us some guidance there?
Yes, the board is authorized to make a recommendation. It is not a binding requirement on the chair. As I said, the policy limits those who can call the meeting. The chair will certainly take that into account as a preference of this board and decide to call the meeting or not, but ultimately that's the only process. And certainly if you don't able to get a quorum for a special meeting, the board will take it up on December 5th, but it's certainly appropriate for this committee to make a recommendation.
I didn't hear a second from Director Knight's motion. That's why I asked the question. So I at this point, I would suggest that maybe we bring it up under new business if that's necessary, or take it up right now as part of your point of privilege. But there needs to be action that can be taken, at least in moving forward on calling for an investigation. And I think that's the appropriate thing to do. So if it means a second to Director Knight's motion, I will make it.
Commissioner Schisler is
okay.
waiting to add a comment, and then we'll circle back to you, Councilman Schisler, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me
We
okay?
can barely hear
Get
you.
very close to your mic, sir.
Yes, I would be available for the 29th, and unfortunately, this needs to be investigated as quickly as we can. So whatever, if we could get this resurrected and moving as a result of actions that we can take today, then I would support it so that we can get it aired, fixed, cleared up, and taken care of in the best way we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just,
Chair Kemp.
I would just suggest that we could, there could be a motion entertained that we want this meeting as expeditiously as possible, and we can do it right now and then move on with the other business. If you would, if someone would want to make that motion.
So moved, that the board look for an emergency meeting as soon as possible, whether that be on the 29th or the 30th, so that we can have a quorum.
If I could just comment, and I don't know if David caught this, we have 2 motions that are on the floor. So we have this one motion, so is this going to be a substitute motion to that motion that's currently on the floor?
If I need to rescind mine, go with that. We're saying the same thing. Whatever it takes to make it happen. I don't care.
Then that would be an appropriate motion, although it
Draw
would
my
not be an
second on it.
emergency, it would be a special call meeting.
Right. As long as it's an emergency, I want
Done.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right.
Understood.
So I offer a second to this, to the substitute motion. Or the motion that was withdrawn, whichever.
And Ms. Liddell, well, Ms. LeGrand would like to comment.
Yes, thank you. As you all know very well, I was hired to lead HART in a new direction and to help it overcome its troubled past. And I feel that we're making good progress. I don't want anything to disrupt our momentum, and I welcome this outside investigation. I think it is the appropriate next step. The public needs to know that we operate beyond reproach and that they can trust us with the highest level of integrity. If the community has questions, we need to give them answers. Our community members need to know that they can trust HART and its leadership. I was beyond reproach. I was beyond disappointed and disturbed to hear that a member of my team was simultaneously working in New Orleans. She violated my trust in a way I didn't even know was possible. As soon as I learned of the possibility of her working 2 jobs, she was put on part-time status while we conducted an investigation. We confirmed she violated the HART employment policy, and I informed her that her tenure with HART was over. This type of deception will not be tolerated by anyone in this agency. And now we're taking steps to limit our remote work policy and only allow it on an exception basis. We're all aware that COVID brought this remote work option to us. Even some of our board meetings were held remote. But there are some consequences to having that system in place, and we are moving forward to ensure that we build a strong, effective team with everyone being in the office. I also met with HART's attorney, and we talked about discussing an outside third-party investigation for this issue. So we're moving in the same direction. But I believe an investigation that's led by the board will take it to a higher level, and I believe that is what we need. I am committed to being a transparent and accountable leader and organization. I want to make sure we offer the highest level of customer service while creating a positive work environment. I'm sure in the coming days you'll decide on the scope of your investigation. I was also defining the scope of the investigation that we were conducting. And if it is appropriate, I would like to share some of the areas that I felt were of concern.
Can I think the time to do that might be when we actually discuss this with the board present, and it might be better to do it at that meeting that we call.
Okay.
I would just suggest. And I'll, sorry, but I maybe if there's no one else, we could call the question at this time, and that could be done when we actually do a full-scale discussion about this.
Thank you, Ms. LeGrand.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comments. We have a motion on the floor, and Ms. Jackson, would you please take a roll call?
Yes. Committee Member Castor?
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Member Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move back to approval of meeting minutes. In the packet,
So moved.
thank you. Thank you. Ms. Jackson, if you'll take a roll call, please.
Committee Member
Full vote.
Castor?
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Member Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Chair Williams?
Yes,
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
thank you. Move on to Com- Thank you. We're moving now to our section on presentations. The operations and maintenance metrics report will be provided by Mr. Scott Drainville, Chief of Maintenance. Mr. Drainville, you're recognized. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Excuse me, we have someone who's, obviously their mic is on and there's a barking dog.
I'd like to ask everyone to mute their lines. Ms.
What to
Jackson, if
say?
you can mute their lines. Thank
There-
you. Mr. Drainville.
Good
Thank
morning,
you.
Madam Chair, committee members, Mr. Grand. This morning, we're going to go over our monthly operations and major metrics presentation. And we'll start with the operation side. So on this slide, we're showing, we break down each mode for ridership for a total ridership of 1,050,534. Okay. It's not changing. So next slide is on-time performance. For October, our on-time performance was 71.5%. And on this graph, you can see from our best performing routes to our least performing routes. Monthly total trips, just under 45,000 total trips for a completion percentage of 99.7%. We had 32 partial missed trips and 88 total missed trips, less than a percentage. Onto the maintenance side, for our scheduled maintenance, FTA and FDOT do mandate us to have an on-time PM compliance of 80%. HART's goal is 85%. In October, we did 96 scheduled inspections. One bus was late for an on-time completion from 98.6%. On our mean distance between failure, you can see the trends moving up. We were at 5,045 miles between failures for October. Major mechanical failures, our goal is 15,000. We were at 14,895 for the month of October. And at this time, I'll take any questions.
I have one
Commissioner
question.
Alderman, you.
Could you go back to,
recognized.
because we skipped it real quick because we were getting through, the number of routes with the highest trips? Not the one before that. That one.
Okay.
So Route 1 is largely the route that runs between the university and downtown area, which had a pretty high trips. Where's, for some reason, I can't place 6, for some reason.
The Route 6?
Route 006, yes.
What do you mean? Where,
That
what's
travels from what area to what area?
Maybe in transit right by the 21st facility.
Okay, that's what I thought. I was gonna say, that basically comes from home to wherever else it needs to go. So, are there passengers on that route?
Oh, yes, it's one of our top routes.
Okay, that's what I wondered. I wanted to make sure that we were there. Okay, so that makes total sense. And there are a significant number of routes, but the next slide does give a telling story when it comes to whether or not we're able to actually do on time when our second highest route is at 68% on time. Is that largely due to congestion or?
And there's multiple factors. Congestion is a factor, especially schools in. Snowbirds, we did have from September, we had 12 active detours. In October, we went to the 31 active detours. And then we had an influx of new drivers, so we probably had about 40 new drivers in the last few months. Once they're on and onboarded, they're into extra board, so they have to learn all the routes. So they're coming in each day, not knowing what route. So there's a couple of determining factors when it comes to that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
On the mechanical, it appears that the majority of the trips are missed, partial or full trips missed because of mechanical. Is that improving or getting worse?
No, it is improving. We have been short about 11 mechanics for the last 2.5 years, but it is improving. We put in enough buses, they call plug buses, so we stage buses around, so if something breaks down, we can fill that service as quick as we can, so.
Okay, thank you.
Director Knight.
Yeah, if you may, you're saying 11 mechanics short for the last 2 years. Wasn't it budget for mechanics, or haven't we added any mechanics?
No, so we have been budgeted for 43 mechanics. It's just, I think it's just nationwide, there's a problem with hiring qualified technicians.
Mr. Drainville, is it possible to show us the trips that may have opportunities, and then show us the trending for those trips, and then the top drivers, so we can identify those that we're able to make it, to improve based on what those trends are, and those that we really may have to do something very different on. Because I can't tell, we're looking at a month-over-month view and looking at those discretely. If we could look at the trends for those trips, maybe we can identify and see if we're improving in those areas, or if there's, specific call-outs, because you mentioned that you have new bus drivers, and those bus drivers have to learn a number of routes, versus if there's a need from a resource standpoint.
We could provide that data in the next committee meeting.
Okay, I think it would be insightful for us to see some of those opportunities and the trends, and then what our plans are to help in those areas.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Drainville. Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was comparing the two slides, number 3 and number 4, the one that talks about the weekly ridership, and then the second slide that talks about the on-time performance. The highest on-time performance routes, 84 and 82, they're basically between 400 and 500 riders. Whereas the one that has, 3,000 riders, the on-time performance falls significantly. So I don't know, down to 68% as opposed to 85. Clearly, we have to allot time for people to get on and off the bus. So, in your on-time performance, in terms of expectations on times to be picked up, are we being realistic in the ridership? If 68% of the time we're not on time, and the ridership drops by 2,500 riders, if we were to have that as a goal for each of our routes, it may be a function of the fact that we're not on time and people give up and go do something else, versus counting on the bus arriving 85% of the time. 500 people, or 4 and 500 people are hitting those numbers, and either waiting long enough for the bus to get there, and getting there early enough in the event that it's early, because that I would imagine that's a pretty broad window, especially when some of those routes, for example, if Route 48, is that a 1-hour interval?
Yes. 1 hour frequency, yes. So that's a great question. So the ops and service planning team are working collaboratively to look at the running times from markup to markup. And we just spent this weekend, we had some people tasked to look at the actual running times between the routes from markup to markup. So we are digging in and looking at that.
Yeah, because it does look like, you know, the higher volume ridership, which are very important routes, are missing the on time, but they may also be the more frequent routes.
Right.
So what I would suggest, helping the board understand where your constraints are, maybe separating out those routes that have a more frequent route, and then really identify what that on-time performance looks like. Because if your on-time performance is, you know, 65% for a 1 hour interval, and you're only getting 400 or 500 riders, there may be some food for improvement there that can help our riders trust that we are going to be there when they need us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised. Thank you, Mr. Drainville, for your presentation.
Thank you.
And very much appreciate it. Our next presentation is the title University Area Transit Center Public Restroom Safety and Security Plan Update. And this will be presented by Mr. Dale Smith, Director of Facilities. You're recognized to present, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members, Mrs. Dale Smith, Director of Facilities. I'm sorry. I wanted to talk a little bit more about our restroom refresh and our reopening schedule. Our Marion Transit Center public restrooms opened on November 2nd, and the University Area Transit Center public restrooms opened on November 16th. So the picture on the left will show you the entrance to the restrooms prior to our upgrades. So we installed some steel doors with some additional signage, letting everyone know that the restrooms are for patrons only. The doors are locked, and we actually have a porter that are allowing access into the restrooms. It provides a much safer environment for all of our patrons. On the inside, we made some upgrades as we did with the Marion Transit Center. We put in new hand dryers, new toilet accessories, ADA mirrors, and we added a lot of nice detail to the public restrooms. And we also have a camera aimed at the door in case there's any type of issue we need to review footage on. So we've made the restrooms definitely safer and more positive experience for our patrons. And that's all I have. Thank you. Any questions?
Director Knight.
Yes, and again, thanks for the update and also the continued effort on trying to get all of them open. And the riders, the community really appreciate it.
Well, it's nice. Thank you.
Ms.
LeGrand, I can tell you wanted to say something.
Yes.
Recognized.
Mr. Smith, do you want to share the incident that we had and the great work that the attendant did last week?
Absolutely. So as part of our security plan, if someone's in a restroom for a long period of time, we're to go in and check on them. That's part of what we've trained our staff to do. And last week, we had a person inside the public restroom for an extended period of time. Our porter went inside, found the person unconscious on the floor, notified security, notified our road supervisors, called 911, and an ambulance came and revived the patron and potentially saved his life. So our new policy that has been put in place is absolutely working. And I would hate to think what would have happened had we not had this process in place.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To the attendant for saving someone's life as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Our next presentation is titled Transit Development Plan 2023 to 2032 Major Update. Presentation will be from Mr. Omar Alvarado, Chief Delivery. Mr. Alvarado, you're recognized to start the presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee, and Ms. LeGrand. This is an update on the Transit Development Plan. So last month, we spent a couple of days with you guys just presenting the overall plan. Next step in that process, obviously, is to present it to you guys finally with some updates from FDOT, then go to the board in December for final approval so we can submit the final program to FDOT. So in terms of FDOT's feedback, really it was great to really just get one piece of feedback from them, focused mostly on the financial tables. And this is really related more towards something that's relatively new for FDOT. So they asked for some expansive financial tables. They wanted a little bit more detail. So we provided a new project level project summary plan that begins in section 10.1, and that's in your packets. And we also went ahead and included additional pages related to some of the different revenue sources for the plans. Additionally, for next year, there were a couple items that they wanted to see some clarity on in terms of the public involvement plan, our assumptions in terms of ridership, and again, just reiterating that they wanted a little more details on the financial plan. One of the feedback items from the committees and the boards last month was a little more detail in terms of the costing as it relates to the frequency portion of the transit service needs. So these are all the unfunded needs that we identified throughout our process between surveys, O&D surveys with customers, and obviously, the rest of our public involvement plan, taking some of the 30-minute routes up to 15, some of the 60-minute routes up to 30, and then on the express routes, moving those from 60 to 30. So what you see in front of you is the annual ridership, the capital cost in millions, and the operating cost in millions as well for the first portion of that plan. So that's taking the 30-minute routes to 15 and taking the express routes from 30 to 60. So on this portion of the plan, we're looking at a total capital cost of $18 million, where on the operating side, it's $13.6 million. Some of the assumptions here, the vehicle cost at about $750,000, and the hourly rate at about $142. This is the second portion, which is missing a couple things there at the bottom, but I will summarize the total capital cost here, and this is taking our 60-minute routes to 30 minutes with a total capital cost of $12 million and a total yearly operating cost of about $10 million, bringing the total cost for this frequency portion of the TDP to $30 million on the capital side and $23.7 on the OpEx side on a yearly basis. Last thing I wanted to share with everybody is our top 10 ridership routes. So these are the top 10 routes in the system by ridership. As you'll see, frequency and ridership are directly correlated. So 8 of our top 10 routes are between 30 to 15 minutes, with the last 2 with somewhat of a significant drop-off at 60 minutes. And that is it on the TDP update. Any questions?
Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you. I've looked this over with you and made suggestions a lot, and I think it's helps with a lot of clarity. Can we, and I appreciate that you added in back to the capital costs, the slide, I don't know which one it was, a few back from this. Yeah, capital cost and operating costs, we just passed it. And that's it. And those weren't originally included, and I think we tried to get some ridership in there, so thanks for adding those. Just a question, in terms of operating costs, is this just gross operating costs, or does this include fare collections, and you know, how that would affect it, since some would make a whole lot more in fare collections?
Sure. So this is just net of an increase. So this isn't the full operating cost. This is just the operating cost of going from 30 to 15. That said, generally, you can look at this as a kind of about a double or a 2x factor. So if you want the total cost, you multiply the operating cost by 2, and that'll get you there. However, in terms of the fare box recovery, we haven't netted the cost out to that. Currently, our fare box recovery is at about 10%. So it would really take some time for us to kind of see what the new fare box recovery would look like with the additional frequencies before we could appropriately project that portion.
Great. And the other thing I think is really interesting is that helped me understand a bit is kind of subsidy per passenger per ride. Whereas something like $4.50, I don't know if that was total subsidy or not, on like Route 1, which is Florida Avenue. Whereas if you were doing a route from Brandon, it's about $30 per passenger per ride trip. So I don't know how to work those in, but I think those are interesting things for us to understand in terms of our transit overall development.
No, and you bring up a great point, and I'm actually in the middle of developing those tables that'll show you kind of route by route, and I'll separate it from weekday, Saturday, and Sunday, so you're able to see the different cost impacts and revenue impacts of each.
I would have said that when we were working together and asking more questions, but I think the more I see, the more I start to think, further about
Definitely.
these
But-
issues.
Yeah, and those are just standard tables that are pretty easy for us to put
That's what I
together, so
thought, so,
I
but
can
they,
definitely include that in the packet for December if you'd like.
it's been very helpful to me to better have a grasp on the system and how it works and where, where our investments are. Thank you, though. Thank you for this. I think it's very good.
Thank you.
Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you. You keep knocking the ball out of the park. Thank you very much. This is terrific information. And if you look at the differences between slide 5 that talks about the frequency cost for those 15 and 30-minute headways and the level of ridership, and then you look at the 60-minute frequency and the level of ridership, it is becoming readily clear that we will not be able to ever win the fare box argument, and the revenue cost per rider if we don't have the frequency. And have the on time, as we heard earlier. If we're, only 68% of the time showing up once an hour, not very many people can make that work in their lives. And we are fortunate enough to have, on average, somewhere between 100,000 riders on each of these routes that are doing 60 minutes that are still riding the bus, which is terrific. Except for it could be 400 if it were more frequently. So I think it's important that when you come back on the numbers, looking at the cost-benefit analysis of increasing the route, when we're looking at the cost, I think it's critically important to also do a calculation on what the increase in potential ridership would be and what that return would be. Because at the end of the day, we do cover most of our cost when we have frequency. Even though it would mean more buses and more operators, it would take more and more people off the roads. When you look at, the folks that ride on 22nd Street, that's, weekday average 489,000 people. So it takes almost 500,000 cars off the road that day, or, that year. That adds up over time. And as we continue to look for ways to address our congestion or roads that won't be able to, benefit from revenues that would improve intersection improvements and light synchronization and all those things that we won't have, it becomes even more critical that we do everything we can to get folks off the road, and that frequency will make it possible. And that cost is something that we can determine how to find the partners to pay for those things, whether it's our riders or whether it's sponsors or whether it's wherever, FDOT. But it's going to be important to really show the benefit of actually investing in such a way that actually helps folks get around. Thanks. You're doing a great job. I really appreciate it.
Ms. LeGrand, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. Alvarado, I just wanted you, in response to Commissioner Overman's question, if you could explain what ridership is and the nuance between ridership and riders, just so that there's clarity. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So ridership is really the individual trip, right? So any rider can take 2 trips a day, right, coming in. So a rider is just the individual person, where the ridership is actually the individual trip. So if I'm coming to work, I'm still one rider, but that day I took 2 trips. So coming to work, going home, going to the grocery store. So the ridership represents all those different ways I'm using the system, where a rider is just me as kind of an individual user.
So we can't look at this ridership column and apply it to, like your example, 489 people. That's not necessarily people, it's the number of transactions, if you will.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarado, in comparison to the previous presentation where we were not making all of our routes, how does this cost comparison compare to the routes that we need to fund in order to become sustainable in that area in addition to adding these additional routes?
Could you expand on that? When you say the previous presentation, did you just mean?
I think it was the operations and maintenance metrics report.
Okay.
Where we were above the line up until 74 or 75%, and then we started to go below the line. And so my question would be, I think I made mention to some trending to understand what's necessary for us to get above the line and sustain that performance. And so when I listened to this report, it talks about 2023 and 2032 and the cost and capital that's required to move those routes from 60 minutes to 30 minutes to 15 minutes.
Sure.
So I would assume that that would be a different initiative, right? In comparison to what we have in place today. So what is the plan to get us to sustainability with our current routes in comparison to the dollars we're setting aside or we are shown as unfunded for your plan?
So I'm glad you brought that up. I actually have a presentation right after this one
Okay.
about some short-term plans that we have about that. Now, I will say from a high level, when it comes to some of these, like what it cost us to go from 30 to 15 and all those things, they definitely assume what the current system looks like. And I will say a big piece of that is also the operational piece in terms of analyzing the running time and the on-time performance in order for us to make sure we're giving ample time so we are improving that on-time performance as well. So that's, I would say that's kind of in alignment with what we're looking to do here. They don't live independently. Like as we look to increase frequency, we're also looking to increase reliability as well. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. And maybe we could see that gap at some point.
Sure.
How we close that gap
Sure.
from one plan to the next.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
good.
okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your overview and the plans to move short of those windows as we move forward in the next few years.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to March 2023 markup service change. I believe that is your presentation as well. Thank you.
Good morning again, Chair, members of the committee, and Ms. LeGrand. Before I get started, I do want to say I do have our consultant on the line as well, so if you guys have some additional questions, he can also help out with some of those at the end. So this is just a presentation on the March 2023 service changes. The proposed service changes, we presented early in August with some guiding principles. So we came to you guys in August, kind of showed you what we were thinking in terms of the system redesign, understanding that we wanted to stay within our current resources. We wanted to balance the frequency and the coverage of the system. We wanted to try to eliminate any out-of-direction travel, increase the travel speed, maintain frequency in places where it makes sense, and identify places where we can find alternate modes of mobility. So in terms of the framework, so we use that as kind of our guiding principles, and this is some of the elements that I would say came of that. So we're proposing eliminating low ridership trips in the early parts of the morning and the late PM. We're looking to split some longer routes to make them a little more manageable operationally. We're looking to alter route alignments to provide better straight line directions for origin and destinations for customers. And we're looking to improve frequency and service in parts of the day where the majority of the ridership is riding. And we want to introduce new routes and services that are also being supported through external funding. So the first thing is repurposing underutilized resources. So 2/3 of the system is going to see an elimination of trips. And these trips are trips that are used by very few customers throughout the system. You're really looking at only 12 routes that don't see any changes from that side. So that could mean some shaving in the late night, like a Route 1 that's going to end at 11 p.m. versus 12:30. That could mean some early morning shavings, like the Route 19, that's going to start at 5 a.m. versus 4:30. And here's some additional routes that'll see those same kind of changes. So next, I want to go into some of the overview of some of these changes. So like I mentioned before, we're going to split some routes. So what you see here is 4 of the routes that we're going to split, or the 4 routes that we are splitting: the 6th, the 30, the 33, and the 39. So we're splitting those at Nat Park, at the West Shore Transit Center, UATC, and Yukon. The 39 is also seen in alignment on the east side of it, and I'll show you guys what that looks like later. And then you've got routes that are going to see some alignment changes. So minor changes are like the Route 1 that'll just go directly into the transit center versus making that loop downtown and then going into the transit center. You've got some medium level changes on routes like the 5 and the 8. And then you've got some major changes, which I'll go in some detail further in the presentation, on the 9, the 14, and the 16. Additionally, we're also bringing in new routes like I mentioned before. So the Route 11, the 41, the Uptown Circulator, and the potential for a downtown flex. Outside of the 41, these are all dependent on external funding through AFDOT and some other partners. The 41 is really getting paid for through some of the efficiencies that we're finding in the system. And we're also proposing an elimination of the Route 25. Next, and this is really kind of the payoff, I would say, of some of these changes. So we're looking to increase frequency from every 60 minutes to 30 minutes on 6 routes: the 5, the 8, the 14, the 32, the 36, and 37. By splitting the 39, as you saw earlier, we'll be able to decrease the frequency on the west portion of the 39, which we'll now call the 40, to really align our resources with where the ridership is. So I talked a little bit about the route splits. I want to go ahead and start talking about those. So the first is the Route 6. As you saw earlier, it's one of our heavier routes in terms of ridership, but it is kind of 2 routes in one, right? So it goes from the transit center to Nat Park, and then from Nat Park up to UATC. So we're looking at splitting it at Nat Park to really create 2 routes where we can better control some of the on-time performance, the frequency, and some of its performance. The northern piece of that route will turn into what's called the Route 56. So no alignment change, but it'll just be the north portion of the Route 6 that'll go between Nat Park and UATC. And this will see a reduction in the span of service as well, where we'll go from ending at a little after midnight, almost 1 in the morning, to 11 p.m. Next is the Route 30. And we're going to keep the eastern piece of the 30 essentially the same between West Shore Plaza and the Marion Transit Center. No real alignment changes on that portion. We're really just splitting it, and we're keeping the frequency the same, but again, still reducing some of that span of service. This will be the west portion of the existing Route 30. So this will go from West Shore Plaza to the Northwest Transit Center. As you can see at the bottom here, also, we're looking to redo how we're circulating through the airport to get us in and out of the airport a little more efficiently as well. This is another route where the frequency will stay the same, but we'll reduce the span of service from 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. and ending it at 11 p.m. Next is the Route 33. So the frequency here will stay the same, but this is the western portion of the existing route. We're going to end it at UATC. No real alignment changes here. Again, really just a split of the route. Doing this, however, will allow us to take the low ridership portion of that route and turn it into a flex on-demand zone. That'll be between UATC and Hidden River Park and Ride. So this will allow us to create a mobility on-demand zone in an area where there isn't a lot of frequency or need right now, but we still want to provide some service in that area. And last on the splits is the Route 39. So this is the existing eastern portion of the 39. It's going to stay on Bush Boulevard. Instead of going into the Nat Park Transit Center, we're going to shoot straight out to the Amazon warehouse on Hanley Road. We're also going to reduce the frequency in the early mornings, so it's going to go from a 30 to a 60, like I mentioned before. And we're also going to reduce the span half hour at the end of the day down to 11, and about 15 minutes in the beginning of the day to 5 a.m. And this is the western portion that we spoke about before as well. This is the portion between the Northwest Transit Center and the Yukon Transit Center. No alignment changes here. We're just going to take the frequency from every 30 to 60. So this is one of those benefits of splitting these routes where you can be very specific in the kind of service you provide to each corridor instead of having to wholesale either bring up or bring down. So it allows us to be a little better in terms of some of those metrics we were talking about before. So these are the routes with some major alignment changes. I'll start with the Route 9. So we're going to shorten this route at the Yukon Transit Center. We're going to shorten the downtown alignment as well to make it a little more efficient going in and out of the downtown area. And the 30th Street portion, so that north portion you see there, is going to be taken over by the proposed Route 16 that you'll see shortly here. This is the Route 14, so we're going to take it off of Bayshore Drive there in the south portion near McDill. We're going to go via Swan Avenue. We're going to eliminate the Limbaugh Avenue portion. These changes allow for a zero net change in terms of frequency, so it allows us to make the alignment more efficient and then increase the frequency from every 30 to every 60. And last, on the alignments here is the Route 16, so we're going to extend it beyond Roll Park to the University Area Transit Center via 30th Street, and we're not going to enter the Yukon Transit Center. We don't see too much ridership there, so we see the opportunity to really benefit from this extension. Next, we'll talk about some of the new routes I mentioned before. So the Route 11 will allow us to provide some additional service into the West Shore Plaza area or the West Shore area. It's funded 50% through FDOT, so it's subsidized up 50% of the route. We're looking at a 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. route here, starting in the Marion Transit Center. So what you see there on the left is some of the cost appropriatements. This is funded for 3 years through FDOT with these funds. Next is the Route 41. So one of the important things for me as we were kind of building this out is to really reduce the amount of, if we're going to add something new, let it not be a 60-minute route. Let's do something different. So there was an opportunity here to add this route, but have a 45-minute frequency. It's going to fill an east and west service gap that we have, and it's going to be paid for, like I said before, through some of those cuts we make at the elbows of the service day. The Uptown Circulator, which is kind of like a flex as well, is going to be mostly funded through FDOT and some external partners as well. It's a circulator service that we spoke a little bit about in August, but really the great thing about this region is about 23% of the residents live in zero car households. So really an opportunity to improve access to places with that. But we're looking at about 15-minute service throughout the entire day with the opportunity to flex into other parts of that zone. And a flex just means going off route and coming back on route. So this is the downtown flex, and I will start by saying, like, what you see on the map here is really all three phases of what the potential of this zone could be. We're working with some of the external partners to potentially finalize funding. So I would say this route is conceptual right now until we finalize funding. But conceptually, what we're looking at is basically a downtown circulator that goes between 25 different hubs in the downtown area and provides about a trip every 10 minutes. We're looking on the initial part of this route to be about 250 riders per day, based on just some of the ridership trends we've seen in the past through downtown or in some of the other services of this type that have been in the area. So lastly, I want to go through kind of what our implementation looks like for this. So over the past year plus, we've spent some time analyzing the system. So that's our consultant, Nelson Nygaard, us on the operations side in terms of running times, on-time performance, and things of that sort. We've also engaged our operations group, who's also been very key in terms of providing feedback, suggestions, and things of that sort. So what we'd like to do next is go through our public involvement process. And again, we've already started engaging some of the community with certain elements of this program, but we want to officially kick off our public involvement plan in December. The idea would be to spend about a week about 120 hours of engagement. And it's not just going to be what I call kind of old school engagement where we're going to set up community meetings and expect people to come. We're certainly going to do that, but we're also going to be very grassroots because of the extent of these potential changes. We're going to have people on vehicles communicating with people, giving out surveys, talking to customers, and collecting feedback in that way. That way, we meet people where their trip is at. We're able to communicate the potential changes and impact to their particular trip and really gain a lot of that feedback from that standpoint as well. From there, depending on what the public involvement looks like, we'll take that feedback, we'll incorporate it into our plan, and we'll come back to you in January for final approval. And then we'll go through our operations process of training operators, hiring, going through our bid process for the potential start date of March 5th. Any questions?
Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Well, you know how I feel about routes. Thank you. This is helpful to see how we can probably get folks, to where they need to go a little quicker. I noticed there hasn't been any potential changes or consideration that I'm aware of at the moment, as it pertains to the south routes down in the Waimama area. That is a transit-dependent community at the highest level, I believe, in the county. So I noticed that you said in the university area it was very transit dependent in the sense that there are no cars in the household. We have a similar circumstance or population rate, I would assume, down in the area of Sun Cities as well as Waimama, all across that area. How are you coming on that?
So there is, and we mentioned this item, I want to say at last month's meeting, and apologies for not having that slide here. I'll make sure it's on there for December. But the flex, the South County flex, we're going to go ahead and expand the zone essentially, or we're going to go ahead and serve that Publix. So we're pretty much using that as kind of a test to see if there's any potential for any additional service down there. But certainly connecting people to that trip generator there, which we don't do currently, I think is going to be a big boon for that service right now.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate it. Spent a lot of time, talked about putting up slides so people could actually see the routes. And I had always been very curious about kind of heat maps or something so we could kind of see riderships on pieces of routes, because I instinctively thought that some of these routes seemed incredibly long, and I wondered, does this part of this route truly have what kind of ridership does that have? Or the other part would be very strong ridership. So I was very interested in seeing the realignment of some of these routes, and I think, as you put it, aligning resources with ridership, sometimes splitting them, sometimes, and so there could be more frequency on a part of it that had very strong ridership, whereas the other part was kind of taking down the entire route, making it an hour long, extending it. So these kinds of efficiencies, I think, are exactly what we must do with our extraordinarily limited resources. As many members of this board might know, I've also, while I am, I think it's excellent if we can have these circulators, these kinds of special services we're talking about for every 15 minutes downtown in the USF area. With our limited resources, I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't where HART's investment was going, because so much else is so desperately needed. So I think I've been really clear and concerned in the past with our desperately limited resources, that the resources for these kinds of circulators or special, mobility options, which I think are just excellent, that they are subsidized in some other way besides our, desperately short routes that are needed. So I'm pleased to see that. I'll be watching the ridership on that, and I just want to make sure that unless and until we get other resources, that those don't become something that we're forced to pay or that HART puts our resources in instead of other routes that are so critically and desperately short at this time. But I'm pleased with all the presentation, the detail, as you've explained, the choices and decisions that were being made about how to do this. And good to see Sly come back on, Sly Avenue as a route. I think that's important. So thank you for the presentation. I think it was very well done and very considered.
Thank you for your time.
Councilman Schussler. We can't hear you, Councilman Schussler.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. This was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. In my 4 years here, I've seen lots of adjustments made, and there were chop here and add there, and not the detailed analytics that went into this process, and previously anyway. So I'm very, very glad to see this. And I think that with the proper rollout, that it'll be well received, because it's a mixed bag. Where we took away a few things, we added back in other areas. So, but I do have one quick academic question to that. Was how big was your working group that did this development or this the analysis and decisions?
So I'll answer that question in two phases. So in terms of the development and I'd say the system analysis, 2 planners, 1 scheduler, me, plus a full staff on the Nelson Nygaard side of 4 or 5 people in terms of the analytics as well. In terms of the ops review, we've included our maintenance folks, our dispatchers, our street supervisors, our operations leadership, our drivers. Basically, every part of the organization has been involved in that review in one form or another. And the next step for us is going to that full public involvement where we're going to involve now the community to get their feedback and their suggestions on this as well. So this is really, to me, a co-created process where it's the community as a whole is rebuilding, revamping the system together.
Thank you very much. That's the answer I was hoping you were going to give, because this is something that gets built from the bottom up, and everybody has to participate. And you've done exactly, you've set this project out that way. And I think it's kudos to Ms. LeGrand and you and her staff and everybody all up and down the whole organization doing what needs to be done in this type of an analysis. Thank you very much, and let's see how the public responds.
Thank you.
I see no more hands raised. Thank you very much, Mr. Alvarado. I appreciate your time and presentation. We are moving on to the committee action items, and in light of the fact that we've had in-depth presentations and dialogue in regards to 5A and 5B, I recommend we combine those committee actions together and ask for a motion for 5A and 5B at this time.
Second.
Thank you. May we get a vote? Ms. Jackson, please.
Committee Member Castor?
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Member Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Chair Williams?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next item, action item is 5C. In your packets, there's a write-up and proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the HART Board of Directors to authorize staff to proceed with the solicitation for a new or refurbished ferry in a not-to-exceed amount of $84,100. Do committee members have any comments, questions for staff?
So moved.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, will you take a vote by name and announce the vote result, please?
Committee Member Castor?
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Member Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to committee action, item 5D. In your packets, there's write-up and proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the HART Board of Directors to authorize staff to proceed with the solicitation for procurement of a contract for shop towel and walk-off mat rental for HART facilities. Is there a motion to recommend at this time?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Ms. Jackson, will you take a vote by name and announce vote result, please?
Committeemember Castor?
Yes.
Committeemember Kemp?
Yes.
Committeemember Knight? Committeemember Overman?
Yes.
Committeemember Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Chair Williams?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. In your packets, you can find a write-up and proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the HART Board of Directors to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to extend the transit advertising contract with Vector Media Transit LLC up to 6 months with an end date not to exceed June 30th, 2023. Do the committee members have any questions?
I have a
comment?
question.
Think for staff. Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you. Just one question. I appreciate that we brought this back because there was a talk about extending them for 6 months while we work through our next agenda item. My only recommendation would be to, rather than do an end date not to exceed, which is a specific date, I would recommend using an end date once we've gotten the next agenda item done. So for example, in the event that let's say Vector Media Transit, participates in the next agenda item, or doesn't, one or the other. But there is a delay associated with implementing the next agenda item. Are we going to just not have any advertising on the bus in the event that we're not able to hit the June 30? We have missed deadlines before, and I wanted to make sure that if there's a clause in here that allows them to continue until we have the other strategy in place, that we don't lose out on revenue or have to pay back advertisers, because we decide, or we need to, or we don't get the, how does it work, where they pay in for amount of advertising, that we're able to make sure that we get that transition run smoothly. So is it end whether or not we have the other strategy in place or not? That's what I'm asking,
Ms.
or trying to
LeGrand?
ask, anyway.
Yes, so as you stated, in the past, we've extended their contract. So what we do in working with procurement, if we know we're not going to have a new contract procured before the termination of an existing contract, we would come before the board and ask for an extension. In this case, we feel fairly confident that we'll be able to move forward with the next agenda item and have it in place prior to June 30th. But if we got to May 1st and we knew we weren't there, we would come to the board and ask for a month-to-month extension until the new vendor became on board. But, for a management process, having a definitive end date gives the team something to really focus on and making sure we get it done. So our recommendation would be to keep June 30 with the recognition that if we need to extend it, we can come back before the board and ask for that.
Okay, so the only question I have there is if it's workable for the vendor to have 30 days notice for on or off, because, getting into the yard, doing the unwrapping, all that takes time. So is 90 days more appropriate, or 30 days is what we're only able to manage?
So there are terms in the contract as far as how much notification we need to give them. So again, if we needed to come before the board to extend the contract, we would make sure that it was within that time frame of the specific contract terms. I believe for the Vector Media contract, there is a 30-day window.
days.
So if I'm wrong, it might be 60, but I do believe it's a 30-day window.
Okay,
And that's on both sides. So
Yeah,
they
that-
get 30 days and we get 30 days if they wanted to end their contract.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you very much. I just thought it might be helpful because sometimes we have run into a little bit of a hiccup there, and we want to make sure it's a workable solution for the organization, but specifically for HART. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, will you please take a vote by name, please, and announce vote results?
Committeemember Castor?
Yes.
Committeemember Kemp?
Yes.
Committeemember Knight?
Yes.
Committeemember Overman?
Yes.
Committee Member Schisler,
Yes.
Committee Chair Williams.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to recommend, excuse me, this is the last committee action item 5F in your packets. You can find a write-up and proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the HART Board of Directors to authorize staff to proceed with a solicitation for procurement of a vendor contract for transit advertising or sponsorship.
So moved.
I'll second it, but I have a question.
Thank you. Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you. Good backup. Looks like it'll make for an easy transition. I did have a question, though. The solicitation method, because I've participated in RFPs before as part of the evaluation team and score team. Who's the select group of subject matter experts? How are those persons selected or identified?
On our internal evaluation committee?
Well,
Is that what you're
it
asking?
says in the backup, it says the solicitation will be conducted by using an RFP process whereby vendor responses will be evaluated, scored, and ranked by a select group of subject matter experts and an award made to the vendor with the highest ranked proposal. Is that an internal select group or external? Who is the select group of subject matter experts?
So I would say regularly the way we form our selection committee is representative of members of the HART team who work in those areas. So there's a group of people who are managing the current contract. Their selection committee would probably be comprised, and I don't get into building selection committees for very deliberate reasons, but the head of procurement will work with the subject matter expert group, and they will identify. But in a situation like the ferry vessel, like we don't build ferries here, we don't have anybody on our team who's built a ferry. So in that case, we would put a selection committee team together of subject matter experts that may not reside here at HART. So we would tap the industry to find out if they had someone who was an expert in ferry procurement, and they would sit on our selection committee. So it just depends on the scope and scale of what we're procuring and then the level of expertise that's needed to actually evaluate.
The reason thank you for the answer, I appreciate it. The reason I ask is because we've had some pretty significant changes in our marketing and transit, marketing transit folks here within HART. So I was curious whether it was going to be internal, external. Did you have a process for identifying external persons that would be actually sitting on this group? And the reason I ask is that in the past, when we were dealing with our government consulting contract, a board member was asked to sit on that because it was, because it was at a situation where it was representing the board. This is a pretty important revenue stream, and that's why I was asking the question regarding how that process would be done and who would be the select group. Right. It just caught me when I looked. I was like, who are our select subject matters?
Right. So we're fortunate that in our marketing department we do have several people who've been here for over a decade. So our actual marketing manager has been here for over a decade, and then we also have another individual in our marketing department who's been here for over 2 decades. So I think as far as institutional knowledge, we're not in any deficit in that area. What we definitely will want to do is making sure that we have also a wider array of people. It's sometimes when you review the proposal, it's not just that you understand marketing, but also understanding what the vendor is producing, what they're saying they're going to deliver, how effective are they in conveying what they say they're going to do. So we have, I would say, a diverse team, but you also have to have people on the team who are familiar with what we are procuring. So our procurement department is solid, and they know how to put these teams together and making sure we have the right balance.
Thank you. Ms. Jack, I just want to make sure I read the request here. I think we have a motion and a second, but I just, for the purposes of the records and my notes here, that the next board meeting will be on December 5th. regular board meeting. Thank you. If you,
Committee Member Castor,
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp,
Yes.
Committee Member Knight,
Yes.
Committee Member Overman,
Yes.
Committee Member Schisler,
Yes.
Committee Chair Williams.
yes.
The motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. Ms. Manel, I just wanted to clarify, I did not, I asked for a motion and a second, but I did not read the question. Did I need to go back and read the request?
I think it was pretty clear from the record what the motion
Okay,
was in the
thank you.
second, so we're in good stead in that regard.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, committee members, for your diligence in these actions. There were quite a few of them, and I appreciate the patience to get through them as quickly as possible and with the engagement. Procurement monitoring, and I'll hand that over to you, Ms. LeGrand. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go through this one quickly. This is our sole source report year-to-date. So you'll see that year-to-date, we're at 561,000 approximately. For the month of November, which is not over yet, so the next meeting, we may have some additional items for the month of November, but we just added these here today. So you see that Everbridge and Bonfire. So Bonfire is a procurement tool that we use to, review. And then Everbridge is our mass notification software. So that's when we get alerts if there's an incident in the system or something like that. So just wanted to give you the update. We can go on to the next one, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you. If we move forward with the task order contracts monitoring, please.
So these are the task orders. So we have 2 on-call task orders. And what we're doing is making sure that the board is aware of, similar to the sole source, which task orders are moving forward and how much they're for. So for the first one is our A&E General Consultant Task Order. And this provides a list of the task orders for FY22. We have 3 firms on call. The 2 that have been working are WSP and HNTB. So WSP was working with us on planning and scheduling work. And then we also had HNTB. They helped us with the grant application for our bus facilities application. That was for the heavy maintenance facility. And WSP also provided some assistance on the TDP, Transit Development Plan. So just wanted to share that with you. Our overall contract amount for the A&E contract is not to exceed $3 million. So you see the table beneath, the one that, table B, you show the remaining amount on the task order. So we're at 2.6 million remaining in this on-call. It's an on-call for 3 years, and it was at not to exceed of 3 million. So just wanted to give you an update on that. The next on-call we have is the bus transit infrastructure contract, similar here. The first table shows the FY22 awards that we had, and for the most part, this contract is really to install bus stops and shelters. So that's what you'll see. And then in Table B, those are the FY23 awards, and it shows you, again, our subtotal and the amount that's remaining on the contract. So what we're going to do moving forward, in addition to the sole source awards, give you a monthly update on the task order, because those were approved for, a not to exceed amount, but the individual task orders, we don't have to come back to get approval, but I do think it's prudent for you to know what we're moving forward with. So this is the first time you've seen this, but it'll be in the agenda moving forward.
Thank you. I'll continue to hand that, keep the agenda, keep the
Adding
next
stuff to the
session,
agenda.
and moving into the old business at this
Okay.
point. Thank you.
So for new business, or we're old business and
Old business.
Old business. So we wanted to take this opportunity to recognize Commissioner Overman serving on the board, and we didn't expect to have this type of discussion, but it is what it is. But we did not want you to leave empty-handed. I was very fortunate to be able to work with you over the last almost 2 years, and I would say that your focus on the community, and especially for me, your interest in advocating to eradicate human trafficking. From day one, you talked to me about that. Even on my one-on-one interview over the phone, you talked about that. And then you made sure that HART was also a part of that conversation in the community. So just want to give you a little token of our appreciation and wish you well on the next chapter of this journey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if we clap or anything, but I think it's appropriate.
Never had a glass bus.
There you go.
That's great. Thank you so very much.
We didn't put any advertisements on it.
I see that. And I can see in all the windows. It's awesome. No, I want to say to all of you, and for those that aren't here today because it's not a regular board meeting, how much I've really enjoyed being on this board. It's been challenging. We've gone through some really tough things, you know, and there will always be tough things, especially when resources are so tight. But we do have a passion for making sure people can get around, and it's critically important that transit be part of our overall economic development mix. And having the opportunity to share that and be part of that has been my pleasure. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and that's very sweet.
Commissioner Kemp?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Commissioner Overman for her dedication and service on this board. You've been a very hardworking member. You never stop focusing on transit-oriented development as well, and people having affordable housing and transit, I know, is a huge interest, and you have pushed it to the nth degree in terms of doing everything you could. And you've also been a really strong advocate for HART in the community and explaining HART and explaining the needs of HART. So thank you so much for everything you've done for HART, and I know it's not over, but thank you for your service in these past 4 years.
I'd like to echo the same and say that, you have such an informed passion for transit, and I think that's incredibly important. And you have the heart for service and making sure that everyone has equal opportunity. And I too wish you the best in the next chapter, and I have no doubt that this will not be the last stop on your HART journey.
Commissioner Knight?
Again, thank you.
Have a good
And
night.
enjoy working with you on the board. But before we met here and after, we always did and worked together. We will continue. And we got some more fighting to do and some other things. So, I'm always in your corner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
I'd like to share, you've just always been very passionate, no matter what you have to say or what you do. And for me, I think your level of preparedness is just among the best, at the top. And no matter the subject, you have always done your homework, and that has always made me want to work harder and do more for others. And so I thank you for being such a great role model and representing the community and HART. You're one of the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not going anywhere. I just won't be sitting in this chair. I'm not going anywhere, so.
Commissioner Overman, it's been a pleasure working with you the last 4 years. Learned a lot from you, and look forward to what you have coming up in your next chapter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. We are moving on to new business, and I'm sure we'll hear more about you in the future. So, thank you so much, and I consider this meeting adjourned at this time. Thank you, everyone.